Hello and welcome back to another episode on Let's Talk Football Careers with myself, Barry, and today's guest, Keith Hackett. How you doing, Keith?
I'm very well, thanks, Barry.
You good? That's great. I'll just do a little summary of your career, Keith, right, just for anybody watching. So, you're a former referee, born in 1944, and you're counted as being amongst the top 100 referees of all time. 1975 to 1991 was your sort of most peak time of your career. You ref FA Cup finals, top flight English games, European Championships, Olympics, Charity Shield, and you started at non-league. But could you actually give me a wee sort of insight into from a young age, because you were brought up just as the war was coming, the Second World War was coming to an end, I believe, eh?
That's right. I mean, we were brought up in a terraced house. I have two brothers, or I had two brothers and a sister. My father was a steel worker, and I was expected, of course, to like my eldest brother, to follow my dad to the steel work. But fortunately, he had a second thought, and I was sort of put in the drawing office as an apprentice, and I stayed there for a few years, so until I was 21, and then I moved to a design company in terms of structural engineering and got involved with that. At the same time, I started my refereeing career in local parks, and I think a lot of people think that we just get to the Football League without those stepping stones. And I was 12 years refereeing week in, week out during the season at grassroots level. And even when I got to the Football League and then the Premier League when it was formed and the international panel, I would often be midweek, a UEFA game, a European Championships, or a World Cup game, and I'd come back to Sheffield and referee a couple of pub teams, and that's how my career was throughout that period. So Premier League.
I spoke to. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was saying I spoke to Scottish referee John Robotham. I don't know if you remember him.
Yes.
And he was saying the exact same. He says the hard yards are what you don't see, he says, and it sets you up great for obviously later in your career when you've got to deal with proper professionals. But I mean, some of the things that you must see at that level, you couldn't imagine, eh? I mean, the abuse you must get, eh?
Well, I think to be honest with you, I think the level of abuse now aimed at younger referees is much, if you like, forceful than it was during my period and my early career. All we got was a lot of encouragement. I think teams were happy that they got a qualified referee. And of course, often people would say, look, Keith, this is not a cup final. But for me, every game was about giving my best and physical effort. I mean, I would get up at maybe 6 a.m. And go and run around the local football field, usually about 11 to 12 laps, always timed because I was very competitive. That helped the training, and then I'd do some sprints. I'd referee Saturday and Sunday, and in midweek, I'd referee five-a-side. The car dealers in and around South Yorkshire had their own competition where they came to a gymnasium and played five-a-side. And in fairness, I was fortunate enough to referee them. I mean, there were some formidable characters, but it sort of, it was great for my career because, I was still a relative youngster, 16, 20, still young as far as a lot of people playing the game. And of course, the challenge on a Sunday morning was hoping that the two captains were at least sober before you blew the whistle to start the game.
Make sure they've got 22 players. You're right, the number quite sober. That's a bonus.
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, from there you went on, right? 1976. I'm moving forward to that was when you got all your badges. You were saying you were 32-year-old. Is that right?
Yes. I was. I'd had a spell on the Northern Premier League when it was formed. That was, teams like Wigan Athletic and Macclesfield and Altrincham, Boston United. And so I then was promoted to the Football League as a linesman. Now we call them assistant referees, but as a linesman. And was probably a couple of years running the line. And going to Old Trafford, going to St James's Park and Anfield on the line, a couple of yards between you and the spectators, so you felt them on your back. You certainly got used to the atmosphere, and then I was promoted to the referees list, and that came as a surprise. They said at that time it was a supplementary panel, so you had a few games, you had to really prove yourself. So they were tough, but I still remember to this day going to Stockport County, which is under the flight path of Manchester Airport. And I always make the reference that I can remember during that game, my opening game, I was nervous, of course, but one player said to me, "Ref, can I have a word?" And I thought he was going to have a go in terms of my decisions. And he said, look, ref, I just want to tell you, you every time a plane goes overhead, you're looking at the planes, mate. You're supposed to be refereeing the football match. So it was, it was a good learning point. And I think that it's sometimes some referees will see the players as enemies. I'm very much the other way. If players are enjoying themselves, I want to enjoy the game as well, and I want to keep it flowing. But I knew that if I had to come in, I would come in, and I would be tough. But I think, unlike today, I think a lot of referees in my era, and I run the line to people like Jack Taylor and Pat Partridge and Clive Thomas, then household names, international referees themselves, and I looked up to them and I learned a lot from them. And I can remember one Sunday morning refereeing two pub teams, and I just glanced across the pitch, and there was George McCabe, who was a FIFA international referee who'd done the World Cup in '66, and Derek Dooley. Now, Derek Dooley was my hero because I'm a Sheffield Wednesday fan, and I used to go to Hillsborough as a youngster, and this ginger-haired centre forward was a cult hero. He was just fantastic, and of course to see him at the side of the pitch, I've gone amazing. And then there was a knock on my dressing room door, and in walked Derek and George. They were very, very complimentary, but I always remember one remark from George McCabe, and he said, "Keith, I want to give you one tip." And he goes, "What?" He said, "When the game's taking place, I notice that you're following the path of the ball. You're looking at the ball in the air. I want to tell you something. The ball never committed an offence. Players commit offences. You should be looking at the dropping zone and the reactions of the players, not the ball." And I pass that advice on to referees regularly, because I think that I see referees doing that in their early informative years of their career.
It's a side of football that a lot of us don't get to actually think about and tap into, because it's all too much tactics and looking at the players and that. But what the referees do, and what, even as a linesman, I mean, how does that compare? Obviously, it's different now with having VAR, but that must be been a hell of a job as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, what a lot of people don't understand, first of all, is the amount of fitness required and dedication. So Saturday afternoon might well be for 90 minutes, but in the middle of the week, I was studying the laws. I did a lot of what I now learn. I didn't know at the time, but what I now learn is visualization. So, in catching the bus to work at that time, and I would be thinking about situations on the field and incidents and how would I deal with them. With assistant referees, with running the line, it's a difficult task because, you know, you've got to be in line with that secondary most defender. And you soon learn that if you're a metre ahead or a yard ahead or a yard behind, whatever decision you make, it's going to be wrong. And so that movement for an assistant referee, sideways movement up and down the line, and maintaining the vision of the referee is so important, because what you don't want to be doing is the referee's signaled an advantage and you're flagging when he's seen the offence and he wants the play to continue. So you develop techniques, but for me, it was a learning experience, because every time I run the line to a referee, I would watch that performance very carefully. Watch how that referee was interacting with the players, you know, and they were all characters. I mean, if you took Jack Taylor, World Cup referee, he was quiet around the field of play. The players just gave him respect. Whereas others like Peter Willis, who was a policeman by profession, had that air of authority, but sometimes it dominated. So for him, you know, he put every challenge into a black and white category. And sometimes, you know, around challenges, there's grey areas, because the laws of the game bring up many aspects of the subjectivity of the application of the law. And you sometimes sit there and go, don't jump in, you know. If
you can't make a split-second decision anymore, eh? You have to really have a wee second to think.
So you quickly learn that you're trying to develop your career like a midfield player. If you're a good midfield player, it's amazing the amount of time they have. They never seem to panic. And they put out those passes, you know, the Glenn Oddles, the Platinis, you know, Anson at Liverpool. There are many more of that particular type who just had plenty of time to make accurate passes.
And they're in the right way, the right touch, obviously, and everything, and it frees up.
And therefore, my approach was, you know, when I got into the professional game, it was, I know full well, as a spectator, as a fan of Sheffield Wednesday, that the fans haven't paid the money to watch the referee. And interestingly, I was I'd been making my judgments, running the line and thinking, what a good referee he was. I didn't really see him. You know, the players responded to him, and I could see that referees talking a lot off the ball. So I was, if you like, it was my apprenticeship at the professional level, learning very quickly from how they refereed. And then when I was promoted to the full-time middle, putting that into practice.
Yeah, a lot of proud moments there as a referee that people forget about as well. I mean, you know, getting called up and doing big games like that, nobody really sees that side of it. You can kind of go under the radar, and it's the same way. I mean, it takes me an hour to go to see the football and come back for the home team that I support. And me and my daughter always say that is, if we don't talk about the referee all the way home, then the referees had a good game. But the problem is, a player can have an average game, score a goal, and they're all over the papers about how amazing they are. And if you have a good match, nothing gets said, and that's how it's got to be, I suppose.
Well, I think that we all want to facilitate a good game with, you know, little conflict. But the reality is that we come across and have to deal with conflict. That's the very nature of the game. I think what is more difficult now for referees is, you know, when I was at a game refereeing, you know, unless it was a final. If it was a final, you had a lot of cameras. But generally, a football league game would have 3 cameras. You know, that's all. If you take an average game at the Premier League level, there's a minimum 22 cameras that are broadcast cameras. Then you've got another eight cameras. Well, you've got another 14 cameras, 7 round each goal for VAR. And then
And they can freeze it.
Yeah. And so as a consequence, maybe on a Saturday night, match of the day, there was probably 10 minutes of my game, 20 minutes at most, if it had been a good game. Whereas now, literally every game is live and it's broadcast around the world. And of course, it's no longer it's no longer match of the day and a 30-minute broadcast of the highlights. We're seeing game after game after game, and we're seeing probably an hour of lead up to the game, and then probably an hour afterwards. And of course, we're seeing the forensic examination that takes place with Premier League games and Scottish Premier League games and international games. And therefore, the referee's only got one pair of eyes. And I can assure you, he's human. They do make mistakes. And the reason they make the mistakes often is they're in the wrong position with the wrong viewing angle. So the process of a decision by a referee, decision making, is to see, recognize, think, and then act. And that's a very quick process. But if you don't see, or you don't have a clear view of something, then you've got a problem and you're in the area of being criticized for making an error. And what the one thing that I see that makes life very difficult for referees is players going down on the ground, diving, if you like, simulation, and they're very, very good at it.
Yeah, it's trained in them now.
Yeah. And I think that scenario is very difficult for the referee because he's only got one chance. And of course, here's me supporting VAR when it first came in. And I'm thinking, well, we're going to get these players who dive a bit and manufacture contact. We're going to get them out of the game. And in reality, VAR is not allowed to intervene, only perhaps on penalty kicks. In that scenario. So for me, it doesn't do the full job.
That's where, as a fan, and you're talking as a fan as well, it's so frustrating because the equipment's there, the technology's there, everything's there to make it work. It's just implementing it properly and keeping the I mean, I've seen me watching games and it's been up in Scotland, there's been 5-6 minutes to decide if somebody's offside and that. It's like the fans don't want that, But can I touch into your back to the linesman time? Wembley, 1979. Now, this was stepping out in front of a 99,000 crowd, How did that? I mean, you were senior linesman to Ron Chalice, I believe. Is that right?
That's right. I think how that came about was in the same year, I was appointed to referee the semi-final, and I had Arsenal versus Liverpool, and so I was refereeing then. And then what happened was, so I did this particular game at Hillsborough, and I can tell you, this was the first time that I was actually on the green bit at Hillsborough. I was a fan, the other side of the fence.
It must be like that. This is bizarre, but having to work as well and keep your head there.
And on a Saturday, during the season, before I was refereeing, my dad and I would, probably with a couple of my brothers, we would walk to Hillsborough, which is about 3 miles from where I live. My dad would stop at the pub. He'd have 2 or 3 pints, probably more. And we'd have an orange juice and a bag of crisps. Then we'd get to Hillsborough. We always stood on the cop. But the way it worked was, because we arrived fairly late, we were on top of the spectators, and we would be taken down to the front on the heads of spectators and stand at the front. So in that 79, the fact that my father had passed away, where I lived, terraced housing, I was now married, but where the houses were, they'd all been razed to the ground. It was just wasteland. But I decided that I would drive my car, park it up, and walk to the ground. So I walked to the ground and enjoyed that particular game.
Yes.
Getting the appointment to Wembley was a real shock. Still a youngster, and it was usually Wembley and the FA Cup final was seen as at that time a retiring appointment. You had the game, and that was the end of your career as a referee. So getting that appointment and then working with Ron Chalice, I mean, walking out of Wembley is something special. It's a little, I've had the pleasure of walking out Azteca with 120,000, Bernabeu, Barca, and other grounds around the world. And at that stage, I've only seen Wembley from the seat in my lounge on Cup final day. And so here I was in London. I hadn't been to London very often, and walking out of Wembley, it was a shock to the system for sure.
I bet you the crowd cheers as you come out, because although the captains lead the teams out, it's you that kind of lead the teams out effectively.
Yeah, I mean, you had it was incredible because you're in a tunnel that's fairly dark, but I'm looking across at the players.
To go on stage. That's what it's like. It's waiting to go on stage. That's how it must feel.
Yeah, and I'm seeing very, very experienced players, right? Glazed eyes, and in fear of walking out at Wembley, because it meant so much for players. A historic situation. They probably, like me, I dreamed of refereeing a match at Wembley, and they probably dreamed about playing. And so it was dark, it was cool, and then you come out into a blaze of sunshine and the noise, which is just like on another level. And it was a real boost to my career, because I suddenly realized, wow, this is what the game has given me, and I want more of it,
And for the stadiums you mentioned and going abroad, and things like that, you actually are living the dream, but you're not tuned into what you're doing at the time, eh? It's not until
I mean,
now you look at it.
absolutely incredible, yeah. And I mean, and then of course, a couple of years later, getting to referee the 100th FA Cup final.
Yeah, 1981 against Man City Spurs.
Yes, and of course, because you've run the line, clever. The FA are quite clever, because you've tasted the atmosphere, you know what's coming, you're just absolutely looking forward to it. And of course, as I stepped down, the dressing room at Wembley was pretty awful. You had to come down some concrete steps, which is not great when you're wearing studs in the boots.
Of course.
And you get to the bottom of the steps, and this FA guy said, "Oh, your first decision, Mr. Hackett." And I go, "What's that?" "You've got to make a decision. Do you want the £35 match fee or the gold medal?" And I've gone, "It's a no-brainer, mate. The medal's for me." And of course, that particular game, Tommy Hutchinson of Manchester United scored both goals, 1-1 draw. And as I'm walking up the steps, to where the area where you receive your medal, it's a draw. It hadn't happened for a long time. So you saw FA officials thinking, what would we do next? I just sort of bowed. And as I turned, I realized I hadn't got the medal. So what I was going to get was the replay, because you weren't assured of the replay.
Yep. Now the replay going to be 3-2 to Spurs, and Ricky Villa scored the winner. That was voted one of the best goals in the FA Cup. And on that team, I mean, you're mixing with Jose Ardiles, Steve Archibald, Glenn Hoddle, Graham Roberts, Chris Hughton. I mean, that for you, that's got to be the pinnacle that we didn't see either, eh?
Well, I mean, when you actually look at the Manchester City team, Joe Corrigan and more, you know, you're very honoured. I've always said that as a referee, when people say to me, "What do you get out of it?" and I go, "Well, I don't have to pay for my seat, and I've got the best seat in this ground." And when you know, in that era that you talk about, your listeners can go from 1972 to like 93, 94. Just look at the spread of players in that era.
It's frightening. It's probably come on to your like working with representing England and that, and some of the players in the games that you managed it's top class. It really is. Can I go back right just a wee bit? See to the 1979 when you were a linesman. When we were on Chalice. Was that the 5-minute final?
Yes, it was. Manchester United versus Arsenal. You're absolutely spot on.
I'll tell you a wee story, right? I was speaking to Billy Davies, and this must have been about 5 months ago. I was speaking to Billy Davies, and he'd actually went down to that game. He'd got invited down. I can't remember who the manager was, but he got invited down, and he watched that, and he says it was such a boring game of football. He says, and in the last 5 minutes it came alive. And that was, I mean, in that team there, you're looking at Pat Jennings, Liam Brady, Frank Stapleton, Graham Ricks, Sammy McElroy, Gordon McQueen, Lee McCarry. I mean, it's littered with household names, eh? Brilliant.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, I look at some of those individuals. It's quite remarkable, you know, and you know, I can remember sort of just looking across, and you know, it's quite right. It was the 5-minute final. There was a huge amount of midfield player, and both teams appeared to cancel each other out. And you're thinking, when is this game going to spark? And, you know, I learned a lot because the referee, Ron Chalice, said to me afterwards, it's not over until it's over. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what are you actually saying to me, Ron? And he goes, focus, concentration, because that can happen at any time in any game. And what you've got to do is raise your game accordingly. You know, over the years, you know that, you know, half-time, the game can up to half-time can be, you know, pretty neutral, can be good, enjoyable. But when the manager gets at both teams at half-time, you can come out and you've got a different game. So as a referee, we're refereeing 2 games, the first half and the second half. And then, you know, we gain knowledge about the impact that a substitution can make on a game, and how suddenly that substitution coming on can be somewhat frustrated. You know,
you can change the game, his attitude and the goals that he makes.
Right.
Being a candidate,
I mean, I'll tell you a story. I'll tell a story of I was refereeing Wolverhampton Wanderers against Queen's Park Rangers in a League Cup game. And Tommy Docherty was the manager of QPR. And during the course of this match, we're about 20 minutes into the game at Wolverhampton at Molineux, and they signalled for Stan Bowles to be substituted.
Right.
And I've got to tell you, Stan Bowles was one hell of a player. Control was incredible. But when you looked at that team, you also had Tony Curry. And he likewise. Oh, I mean, they were incredible. So Docherty's at the touchline. We didn't have all the boards and everything indicating for Stan to come off. And he's ignoring it. And I can remember running alongside him and saying, Stan, you're being subbed, mate. And he, what? The manager wants you off. He's bringing somebody else on. I'm not going. And
he's refusing to come off.
I turned to Tony Curry and I said, Tony, can you give his hand? He's not going. It's not your problem, he said. Your problem, mate. And I don't know why, but I went up to. It was going to be a difficult situation, this, and I went up to Stan, and I said to him, "Look, Stan, do you get paid the same amount of money for 20 minutes as you would for 90?" At which he didn't say anything. He just ran off and was substituted.
But that comes with experience and your personality as well.
So, you can learn those things, but players are, in the main, I think, extremely respectful.
I think they know now as well. Because of the cameras and that, they know now they've got to be that more respectful, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
Can I touch into the 1984 Charity Shield? Everton won, Liverpool nil. That was a 100,000 crowd on the 18th of August. Bruce Grobler with own goal, but on the other goal you had Neville Southall, then you had Gary Stevens, Kevin Ratcliffe, Trevor Stephen, Peter Reid, Graham Sharp, Kenny Dalglish, Mark Lawrenson, Alan Hansen and Ian Rush. I mean, when I list the teams of it, it raises a smile right away because it takes you right back. It's brilliant.
I was asked earlier this week, who is my real hero at football? Who do I consider to be the best player that I refereed? And I always answer Kenny Dalglish. And people look at me and say, Keith, you've been refereeing Platini, Maradona, Carlos Alberto, all these top-class, world-class players. They go, well, Kenny Dalglish was world-class. I said, but the difference was 90 minutes. And people would say, what do you mean? From minute 1 to minute 90, Dalglish was on the case. He was an absolute winner. Had a mentality that I win. And he moaned occasionally, but I gave him a hell of a lot of respect. He didn't gain anything from that. But I tell a story, and I'm going further on and jumping about. But I refereed. Now here's John Charles and Bobby Collins, right? So I refereed their testimonial game. It was a joint testimonial game where Leeds United. It was put together very quickly. This particular game, to help John Charles, who was in a bit of a financial sticky position. A hotel that he put a lot of money in had gone bust. And cut a long story short, Dalglish played that night for Leeds United. And I can remember towards the end of the game, they've started to put on a number of academy players. They didn't want injuries for the Saturday game coming up. And Dalglish pushes a ball out to the left wing to this young academy player. And the kid gave up. The ball continued to run down the line. I almost had to separate Dalglish and the Leeds United youngster.
And the testimonial.
In a testimonial. And coming off, Dalglish was still at that young player. And the point that he was making is that it doesn't, and I took the same view. It didn't matter where you were refereeing. If it was two pub teams on a Sunday morning or Saturday afternoon, if you hadn't got a football league game, the same amount of effort had to go in as a referee, because you work hard at earning respect. You can soon lose it if you don't respect players at whatever level they're playing at.
Yeah. And I think that's where your admiration for Dalglish came from, because you could see a lot of his attitude, the same as yourself, and that's where. But best player you've seen today.
I mean, Dalglish was just a class act. I mean, yeah, he was surrounded by good players, but he made some of those players better. Yeah. And when you look at the sophistication of Anson, you got Phil Neal at the back. And you got Grobbelaar with his shaky legs at the penalty kick. I mean, real characters, and of course, I think, in those early informative years, Liverpool had a manager in Bill Shankly, who I met several times, who was a real man of the people. And I say that with great respect, because it doesn't matter whether he was a small child or, a fan or the match referee, he would have a conversation and he would have great respect. I'll tell a story. I was, when I was refereeing in the football league, one week you could be refereeing Division 4, the next 3, then a 1 and a 2. So you were crisscrossing all divisions. And on this occasion, I was appointed to Workington. Now, Sheffield to Workington, with an overnight stay at Ambleside, is a drive forever. And I got to the ground around about 10:30 for a 3 o'clock kickoff. And I'm in the dressing room. I mean, the ground's open. There's no spectators. The groundsman's doing his bit. Eventually, the groundsman and I have a chat. He makes me a cup of tea. We're chatting. And he said to me, I notice in the fixtures, you're at Anfield next week. And I go, yes, I'm looking forward to visiting. But look, I want to tell you that this is the important game here at Workington today. And he goes, well, I understand that. He said, I appreciate that. But if you go to Anfield, I'd like you to do me a favour. And I go, oh, he wants a ticket.
Yeah, or a signature.
Well, if he wants a ticket, I'll get him a ticket. It's not a problem. But he says to me, come with me. And we're almost in this shed. And there's a green tractor, a grey tractor, sorry, not green, a grey tractor. Mm-hmm. And he says, look at it. And I go, yeah. He goes, what do you think it looks like? So, well, it looks pretty clean and new and all that. And he goes, Bill Shankly bought this.
Wow.
And I've gone, what do you mean? He bought this when he was manager here. I didn't even know he'd managed at Workington.
Amazing,
so I've gone, all right. I said, will you do me a favour? Will you try and find Shankly out next Saturday and tell him that the tractor's okay? I smiled and I thought, oh yeah, I can see me doing that.
No, just by the way, just a heads up, tractors have a good match.
So the following week, there I am. I'm at Anfield. I'm in the players' lounge before kickoff. No other body allowed in. Players not allowed in. Cup of tea and a sandwich. That's what was the usual sort of pre-match that they gave you. And in walks Shankly. And he walks towards me and I'm thinking, yeah, this could be interesting. And he goes, Mr. Hackett, you were at Workington last week. I go, yes. And I've forgotten the groundsman's name. And he said, how is Mr. So-and-so? And I go, he's fine. He sends you his best wishes. How's the tractor?
He actually asked about it.
Yeah. And I went, oh, it was okay. He showed me. And Shankly said, I keep inviting this so-and-so to Liverpool, but he doesn't want to move out of Barrow. He don't want to come to Workington. Now, I don't know what the link was there. But that's the game. And so, so going to Anfield and going to Old Trafford were real highlights. Yeah, for sure.
Amazing story. Thanks for that. Listen, you were you also the 1986 League Cup. It was actually called the Milk Cup, I believe.
Yes, it was.
You refereed Oxford versus QPR. Another massive crowd, though, 90,000 crowd there. And it was Oxford's only ever domestic trophy, I believe. Well, trophy as in not kicking through the leagues.
Yes. I mean, I mean, it was interesting because I mentioned earlier Boston United. Mm-hmm. Boston United were managed by Jim Smith, the Jim Smith that managed Derby County, managed Oxford United, and in that same season moved from Oxford United to QPR. So here at Wembley is his former club, is the manager of QPR, and the knowledge that I'd refereed him at as manager of Boston United. And of course, I'm from Sheffield. So was Jim Smith.
Yeah. He's got a great reputation. I was speaking to, I don't know if you know the name Roy McDonough.
Yes.
He says that he's the best manager he's ever worked with. He says he was so good. He says he was straight talking, but a brilliant manager. He said,
Yeah.
Did you ever referee a game with Roy in it? Did you ever referee with Roy McDonough?
I'm sure I did. The name's too familiar for me not to have refereed.
Red card Roy gets called.
He
had the most red cards in British football.
Yeah.
It's a record. He's a top lad. Can't speak highly enough of him.
I mean, I think. Well, the games then were tougher. There's no question, and I think we as referees were a little bit more relaxed. By that I mean, if you had a player who stuck one in early on, you'd have a word on the fly and say, right, that's one too many. And then his opponent, who is done, sticks one in. You go, right, now we're even. Let's get on with it.
Yeah.
But now, of course,
now it's different.
I think, there are some times when I generally think we should take the red and yellow cards away from the referees. I know they're there to communicate to the public and to the media, but in reality, I think it's taken away a little bit of the working relationship that's required on a football field. We're actually on the shop floor when whatever level we're at, we're all working at managing a football match or playing in a football match. And therefore, somebody said to me about a player and industrial language and all that goes with it. Well, I know those words because I worked in a steelworks as an apprentice. So I understood that. And therefore, I'd allow a bit, because sometimes I think we have to recognize that games don't go well for players. They get frustrated. And, when they come out at half time, and this is why I say it's 2 halves, I don't know whether the manager has been unhappy with this particular player. And this manager has absolutely given him stick. And he's coming out with an attitude, I've got to do something. Yeah. And so I think that is the balance that you bring in, reading the game, trying to read the individuals. And if they're getting a bit frustrated, try and help that sort of scenario. And I think all too often we have referees confronting players when in fact they've made a decision. Why stand and admire it? Just get outfield out of the way, and then you haven't got two players arguing, a referee and a player arguing. Takes two to make an argument.
And that's where it comes back to. The ref, like you say, could just walk away and say, look, I've made my decision, any more of it, and I'll be making another decision. And again, I don't know what's the right word for it, but it's very dramatic. It's unnecessary. I don't think you would have enjoyed it as much, refereeing. Say your career started when it ended. There's no way you would have enjoyed it, because you're losing that personal touch as well.
Well, I think, look, Scotland, in Scotland, I think, the likes of Kenny Hope, Bob Valentine, and others, they had personality. But I mean, I also worked not on the football field, but off the football field with Tom Wharton, Tiny Wharton. Right. Like he was man mountain. He had to walk sideways to get through the door, and he struggled to get through the door sideways. And
6'5".
I would be presenting to FIFA referees meetings the need for speed, power. The game has changed from endurance to dynamic sprinting, and you need to train, and sports science and all that. And Tom Wharton used to say, I'm the best decision maker, and if I was getting out the centre circle, something was really, really wrong. And then after that meeting, his first meeting with him, I got a film of him. I asked for a film, some television station had got a film of Tiny Wharton as I knew, refereeing, and I watched it, and he was absolutely right. He didn't move from the centre circle, but I couldn't believe how accurate his decisions were. You know,
It's just
yeah.
It's different times, wasn't it? It's so different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm practicing proximity to play, viewing angles, and the science of refereeing when I coach. And here's a guy who lived on respect and personality, and was almost a copper, stood at the crossroads and not moving, but signalling which way it's going and whether it's a penalty kick or not.
Refereeing as well, eh? It's so different by refereeing, but it just shows that the players and the fans will react to how you behave on the pitch, and if the respect is there, I mean, it's but can I just dive into? We've got 3 more key topics that I really need to cover. Them, no want to keep you too long. Sorry, Keith, but 1988, June the 10th, European Championships, right? So can you tell us, you got called up for that? You then went on to referee West Germany, Italy. Again, the teams and the players are their household names. You've got Bremer, Koller, Barski, Matthias, Voller, Kunzman. Then on the other side, you've got Zenga, Baresi, Maldini, Ancelotti, Donadoni, Mancini, and Vialli. Mancini scored in that game, along with Bremer. Yeah. I mean, how was all that? That must be amazing just to look back on now, eh?
Oh, I mean, you know, now when they play those, they go to referees go to a camp. They spend a week preparing and all that goes with it. Normally on a European trip, it was out on a Tuesday, referee on a Wednesday, home on Thursday. So it was 3 days. And, you know, one of the difficulties that I faced was I'm now a sales director, and I'm sales director and referee, and getting time off work was somewhat difficult. I can tell you that on one occasion, to attend a board meeting, I had to charter my own aircraft to get home. And then on another aspect, I can tell you that I was appointed to the European Cup final and couldn't get time off work to referee that match and had to return it. So, you know, I refereed a World Cup game, New Zealand versus Australia. And I came off the football field and there was a message from my wife waiting for me saying, because I'd refereed that football match, a company I'd worked for 17 years, I was dismissed.
That's terrible.
And so that was the difference between us amateur referees refereeing at professional level. Back to your point, instead of 3 days, this was a 4-day journey. And, you know, so we know that we're given brief who we're going to meet. We know that Chancellor Kohl is going to be at the toss-up or around the start of the game, how the teams are led out, the length of the national anthems, and all that was going off. So, you know, one of the things that I think spectators, fans need to know is that referees are not just refereeing a football match anymore. At the highest level, it's an event. You know, you've got to kick off absolutely on time. You know, I can remember boss of the PGMOL, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I can remember having a meeting at the Premier League. They were unhappy because a referee had kicked off 20 seconds earlier.
Terrible.
And that's why you see a guy from television standing at the side of the linesman or the fourth official giving the signal to the referee to commence the game. So here we are. You know, one of the things that we had was we had a law change. And of course, the laws come around and they're changed in that summer period. And FIFA decided, the IFAB that 4 steps rule had to be applied in this competition.
Right, okay.
But it hadn't been applied in the domestic competitions.
So nobody was used to it.
So I had to talk to both goalkeepers prior to kickoff and remind them that the law was this, steps. I actually had a ball and 1, 2, 3, 4, and of course, then in the first half, you've got the German goalkeepers responding really positively, but Zenger is on 5, and on one occasion, I think went to 6, and I've gone.
Come on.
The game was tight. It was really tight. I'm thinking, I've really got to sort this. So at half time, I actually spoke to the manager and Zenger again and said, look, 4 steps, second half, I must penalise. So please don't take 4 steps. And I'm pleased to say that, or should I say I'm not pleased to say, in the second half, he goes off with a 5 and then he does a 6. And at that point, I've stopped it. And of course, Germany equalised. I think it was Italy were winning 1-0, and then Germany equalised because of that particular incident.
Was that off the back of that? That was when Germany. It was Bremer that scored there.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember seeing the Mancini goal as well. The Mancini goal was a really good goal as well in that game.
Yeah. I mean.
What stadium was that, Keith? Sorry.
They played in Dusseldorf. And it was a really nice stadium. And we were actually staying, if I'm not mistaken, we were actually staying in Cologne. And so we were driven to the ground. Dusseldorf, arrived in plenty of time. One of the problems I had was that there was a Lurpak butter sign, and it was right at the tunnel. As we came up through the tunnel, we had to step over it. Obviously, I'm doing my pre-match inspections. I'm looking at the nets and all that goes with it, and then I had to sort of get involved with UEFA to have this butter sign moved to another position, and the marketing people at UEFA were not happy. But fortunately, the UEFA management recognised, the top guys recognised, hey, it's not good to have players riding over an advertising body.
And that's where they're saying, I can't believe it's not butter came from.
Yeah.
Saying that 1988, we're still in 1988. We've touched into that game there, but September, you also refereed Brazil versus West Germany. Was this one of the last times West Germany was playing before they just became Germany?
Yes, it was. That was. I think that was at the Olympic Games out in Mexico City under the floodlights. No, let me get this right. That was in Seoul, in Korea.
Right.
Yeah, a great occasion. It went to a draw and then extra time. Germany won. It was. It was a terrific match.
Did you say Germany won that on penalties? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That was that 3-2 on penalties? It says here. I've wrote down. I
think it was. Yeah. Mine won us a bit, but the reality was it was a terrific match, and yeah, it might have been the other way. I'm trying to think, but
Brazil, and that was the game that Taffarel was in goals, Bebeto played, and Romario, and then for Germany, I've just written a couple because it's the same squad, but Kunzman and Campos as well played. Did that maybe take you back?
Yes,
to the game?
That's what confuses because in that, because later on when you talk about West Germany and Germany. One of the games that I did officiate that I always remember very fondly was West Berlin versus Karl Marx Stadt, which was then Chemnitz. which was on unification night. So can you imagine on the morning of the game or the evening before, I walked through Checkpoint Charlie on my own, picked up by an interpreter and a guy who looked after me, a youngster who looked after me, and we drove to Chemnitz, Karl-Marx-Stadt, and that was some game on unification night. And then when the game was over, we were taken by car back to the area of where the wall was being knocked down. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. Yeah. And of course,
so closely involved
West Germany no longer. Germany. Yeah.
Aye, it's mad. See, moving on for there, right? 1990-91. I've just put Man U versus Arsenal, massive brawl, but you refereed that game. It was 1-0 to Arsenal. Lampard scored the goal, and there was 2 players ended up getting fined 2 weeks' wages. What happened? Go and just tell us for your side what happened here.
Well, there was a mass confrontation. The game was going okay, and nothing untoward. It was nip and tuck. Like most big games, nerves at times. And then all of a sudden, it sparked. And we've got 21 players in a mass confrontation. And I pile in. So I've piled in. And I've gone, crikey. And it very quickly calms down. You know, when we looked at the video afterwards at the FA office, 16 seconds. The thought process was he could go, he might go. Did I actually see what he did? Did I see it clearly enough? So that could be 3 off. And then it might be 4. And I've decided, just a minute. And this is where I think you need a bit of composure, because I said to myself, actually, if one goes, all 21 could go here. Daft and I've just stepped back a bit, calmed myself down, and then thought, I'll sort this afterwards.
Because it was late in the game. It was late in the game that happened.
56,000 in the ground have all paid good money. And the last thing you want is all of us trooping off. And so I finished the game. I put in the report.
Tactic.
Went to the FA for the appeal and the inquiry. I was shown videos. And they said, look at this, what would you have done? Well, had I seen that clearly, first of all, I haven't got a video clip, and I don't referee the match. What I saw is not enough to send people off because of doubt in who it was and recognizing who it was. I said, I piled in the middle. Anyhow, the consequence was I gave my evidence. The FA were happy with what the evidence and the action I'd taken. You know, they were happy that the game had completed, but that was the first time in English football that 2 teams, 1 team in effect, both teams were deducted points, and so they needed to send a message. I think Man United got 1 point deduction, Arsenal 2, because Arsenal had previously been involved in a mass confrontation, I think involving Norwich City, and therefore, as a result, that's how they got to 2 points and 1 point. But for a period of time, mass confrontations didn't happen. So it impacted positively. But when I did become the boss of the PGMOL, I decided on a criteria. I decided that the 2 assistant referees should, in that situation, come on and help. That they're the eyes as well as my own. So we got 3 pairs of eyes
Extra
watching
view.
close on. Then if I've got any reds, I issue the reds. I ask them, the 2 assistants, have they got any reds? If they have, I issue them, and then yellow cards. And in the 1996 Carling Cup final, League Cup final, I think it was Arsenal v Chelsea, we had Howard Webb was the referee.
Yep.
And from the 90th, it took 6 minutes to calm down. But in that period, he carried out the, if you like, the criteria of how to deal with a mass confrontation in textbook fashion, of which 3 red cards were given and 2 yellows. So it shows you how we'd learned from that.
And it's great. I mean, is that why nowadays when you see a big mass brawl, that's why the linesmen come running on? Then that's
Absolutely.
That's amazing, honestly.
Yeah.
So a couple of years after that, you retired, and I believe you've worked as a ref's assessor for 2004, and you also had a book out, or a couple of books out as well. If you'd like to give them a mention.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in '86 when I was active, I brought out Hackett's Law. But then I joined in '81. I did a piece for Shoot magazine, and Shoot had Paul Trevelyan, the sports artist Paul Trevelyan, and I worked with Paul Trevelyan. I think we did 3 books. You Are the Ref. We did the weekly column in the Sunday, first of all in the Shoot, and then it went to the Guardian magazine on a Sunday, and the format was the public wrote into the newspaper questions about the laws of the game. Yeah. I would give the answers, and Trevelyan would give do the art. I'm just grabbing one.
Yeah,
getting a bit tatty now, but
the Shoot magazine was brilliant. I remember that growing up.
So you got the sort of
that was brilliant.
The artist drawings. There's an
that.
early picture of Gaza and the questions and answers. And
that's how we got it back then. See, now we've got this, but back then that was how, as a fan, you got your information, you touched into the wee side of things, and absolutely amazing. Like,
yeah, I think I've always said, and this is why, I watched the rugby at the weekend. I watched the Lions v Australia. I'm a great admirer of rugby union referees. I think they're wonderful. They communicate brilliantly. And they're dealing with like huge giants of players that are, they're not carrying weight. That's muscle. I mean, like, I won't want to even attempt to stop somebody on a run. But the one thing is, I learned from them. When I was boss of the PGMOL, I listened into the communication kits that they were using, and I was at Twickenham. I was invited to watch a game. I'd never watched a game of rugby, and I listened into these communication kits. And I then, that following Monday, went to the Premier League office, which was my office as well. And I saw the CEO, Richard Scudamore, and I said, look, I want to introduce communication kits into the game. And he was so positive. And we introduced them. We didn't even ask the IFAB. We didn't ask FIFA. We didn't ask Blatter. We just introduced them. And I wish we'd have done the same when, at Old Trafford, Roy Carroll dropped the ball over the line, and the referee had no chance of seeing it. The linesman was out of position. He had no chance. He was in line with the second rearmost defender. Carroll had dropped it over a good yard over the line, and I'm sat in the director's box, and I'm going, "That's a goal." Yeah. How do I? I'm the boss of this organisation. But that summer, I went to the conference, the summer meeting of the Premier League, where there's managers and officials and all that in attendance. And I was asked, given blue sky, thinking, what would I introduce into the game? And at that point, I've gone VAR. Of course, they didn't know what VAR was. And they said, okay, go and get it. And I worked closely then with Orkai to introduce it. I spoke to rugby union referees. I had a vision that it would be accurate, and that we didn't want a quiz. We just wanted a signal to the referee that said the ball crossed the line. And to achieve that, we achieved that in about a year. We used Motspur Park, the training ground of Fulham. And they kindly gave us space. We rigged, Orkai rigged the gantry. And we moved from 3 cameras around each goal to 7. And we moved the speed to 500 frames per second. And that was to give us a very quick, accurate signal to the referee's watch without any human being involved that the ball has crossed the line.
Yeah, because the technology is there, so you don't need to get another human involved to say, oh, we've looked at the technology, and this is where it's breaking it down.
If you think about VAR, and let's just concentrate on the toenail offside decision. For me, it's an absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And the reason it's a nonsense is that for it to be that accurate, you need to have cameras that are operating at 500 frames per second, but they're using broadcast cameras now at 25 frames per second. So now the other thing is FIFA advance and they bring in the semi-automated system. Now they've got the Orkai cameras, and they've got a load of them, about 12, and you suddenly go, this is going to be more accurate. But then they add another part to the mix, and that is a chip inside the ball with a sensor.
Wow.
And so what you've got is you've now got the 2 systems. The one that's been recently introduced into the Premier League that has if you like, a Nike ball. This season it's going to be a Puma. But Adidas cleverly patented the chip in the ball system.
It's just constant.
And so what you have got is the law on offside, and I'm not going to get into detail, but the law on offside, to determine a player is in an offside position, the first action is touched or played the ball. So if you've got a sensor in the ball, you know exactly when it's touched. If you've got a tracking mechanism, the ball's got to be moving before you can track it.
That's right, yeah, of course. So if somebody's standing on the board, it's going to make no difference. It's just trying to get it right. Honestly, the biggest compliment I could give you is that you're constantly, even, I mean, you could have retired years ago, but you're constantly trying to improve your game all the time, and it's a massive credit to yourself, Keith. Seriously.
Yeah. Well, I think that, I work with young referees now, both here and overseas. I watched the Australian referee the club final. When I was in charge of PGMOL, I had Australian referees over, as well as New Zealand referees. And I've seen, they don't have the pressure of the Premier League, but giving them the experience of coming over, spending a week with our sports science, our vision scientists, all those people, and seeing the game in the UK has helped them. And as a consequence, the pleasure I get is suddenly I recognize somebody running out for the World Cup final. I go, I know that guy. And then I look and I go, well, he's been here at the PGMOL. So I think that, I was there at the start of the Premier League. I was there at the start of professional referees. I helped put the paper together. I helped introduce professional refereeing into America with ProRef. I just feel that at the moment we have some, we've got some talent coming through, but we still need to tidy up how VAR is going to operate in the game. The only way VAR is going to improve is when they recognise that the fans are important and that they operate the VAR system in football in the identical way that they operate it at rugby union. Big screen in the stadium, referee out in the middle, everybody can hear what's being said, and then they come to a decision. And that way we might still disagree with the outcome of the decision, but because we're not involved as fans and we're sitting around twiddling our thumbs for 6 minutes, we think it's a fix.
Yep. And we're the last ones. We're sitting in the ground for that 6 minutes as a fan watching that. And we're the last ones to actually find out why that decision was made. It comes up on the screen, offside, blah, blah, blah. Everybody else is watching that. It's madness, eh? But listen, Keith, it's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to chat with you. And we'll have a wee chat off camera again. And like I say, I can't thank you enough. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.